As far as I can understand from these books, all of the ideas on the table now,
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Well, thank you very much for coming. It's Jeff. Good morning. It's great to be here at this amazing UK Battery Industrialisation Centre, which is a key part, as everybody knows, of our low-carbon vision for the future of UK industry and particularly the automotive sector. Wonderful to be here. Great to see you all. Now, let me begin by saying I wish I could tell you that this pandemic that we're going through was over, and I wish I could say that from Monday we could simply throw caution to the winds and behave exactly as we did before we'd ever heard of COVID. I wish I could say that. I can't. But what I can say is that if we're careful and we continue to respect this disease and its continuing menace, then it's highly probable, and all the scientists are almost all agreed on this, highly probable the worst of the pandemic is behind us. There are difficult days and weeks ahead as we deal with the current wave of the Delta variant, and there will be, sadly, more hospitalizations and more deaths. But with every day that goes by, we build higher the wall of vaccine-acquired immunity, a wall that is now higher and stronger in this country than almost anywhere else in the world. And with every day that goes by, our economy is slowly and cautiously picking itself up off the floor. Businesses are opening their doors. You'll have seen the employment figures this morning, the growth in the number of jobs. People are coming back slowly to the office. And over the next few weeks, therefore, more and more people will find themselves back on their daily commute. And as Andy Haldane of the Bank of England has said, there is every prospect that this country is poised to recover like a coiled spring. And it's the mission of this government to ensure that insofar as COVID has entrenched problems and deepened inequalities, we need now to work double hard to overturn those inequalities. And so that as far as possible, everyone, everywhere, feels the benefits of that recovery, and that we build back better across the whole of the UK. And we need to say from the beginning that before the pandemic began, the UK had and still has a more unbalanced economy than almost all our immediate biggest competitors in Europe, and more unbalanced than pretty much every major developed economy. And when I say unbalanced, I mean that for too many people, geography turns out to be destiny. Take life expectancy, even before COVID hit. It's an outrage that a man in Glasgow or Blackpool has an average of 10 years less on this planet than someone growing up in Hart in Hampshire or in Rutland. And I don't know what people do in Rutland to prodigious ages, who knows, but they do. And there's a glaring imbalance. Take university entrance. If you're a child on free school meals in London today, you now have more than double the chance of going to university than a child on free school meals growing up outside London. It's an astonishing fact that 31 years after German unification, the per capita GDP of the northeast of our country, of Yorkshire, of the East Midlands, Wales and Northern Ireland, is now lower than in what was the former East Germany. And folks, I mean, some of you may remember going to former East Germany in the era of communism. I went there actually in 1990, just after the war had gone down. I remember being amazed how far behind West Germany was with their funny two-stroke engine cars and their fake coffee. But we've got to be honest with ourselves. To a large extent, Germany has succeeded in levelling up where we have not. And it's vital to understand that these imbalances and inequalities are found within the regions of the UK, and not just between them. A woman from York has, on average, a decade longer of healthy life expectancy than a woman from Doncaster, 30 miles away, one stop away, on the East Coast main line. In York, nearly half the working population has a higher education qualification. In Doncaster, that figure is only 25%. Why is it that Leeds has 1 in 5 working age people not in work, while in Bradford next door the number is as high as 1 in 3? Why should income per head in Monmouthshire be 50% higher than in Lane Gwent? No one believes, I don't believe, you don't believe, there's any basic difference in the potential of babies born across this country. Everybody knows that talent, energy, and enthusiasm and flair are evenly spread across the UK. Evenly spread. It's opportunity that is not. And it's the mission of this government to unite and level up across the whole UK, not just because that is morally right, but because if we fail, then we are simply squandering vast reserves of human capital. And we're failing to allow people to fulfill their potential, and we are holding our country back. So today I want to talk again about that project of levelling up, and to define it more closely in advance of a white paper later this year that will set out our plan to level up. And we should begin by stressing in all humility that this is a huge undertaking that many governments have debated about and dabbled in before. And though there have been some successes, the overall results are disappointing, and yet it could be so very different. We don't need to look at what has happened in the old East Germany, which, as I say, has overtaken parts of our country. We can look at our own history and the ability of places to recover and regenerate without natural resources, without discovering gold or oil under their streets. Look at London. We should never forget that our national capital suffered a 50-year period of decline when its population shrank by as many as 2 million people between the 1930s and the mid-80s. And the same urban decay was seen in cities around the country. The inequalities were so acute that when I became mayor in 2008, I could travel from Westminster to Canning Town East on the Jubilee line and lose a year of life expectancy with every stop. So it wasn't the tube, it was the environment in the city. And yet at the end of my time as mayor 8 years later, that was no longer true. Life expectancy had increased across the capital, and the gains had been greatest among the poorest groups. And that is what I mean by levelling up. There is much more to do in London. There are still huge inequalities. The deprivation levels have been dramatically reduced. Let's be clear about the difference, the philosophical difference between this project, levelling up, and levelling down. We don't want to level down. We don't want to decapitate the tall poppies. We don't think that you can make the poor parts of the country richer by making the rich parts of the country poorer. And you can't hope to stimulate growth around the country by actually constraining companies from developing, as the Labour government did in the 1960s with their ludicrous industrial development certificates. Levelling up can only be achieved with a strong and dynamic wealth-creating economy. There's got to be a catalytic role for government, and government must provide a strategic lead. But that requires consistency from government, not chopping and changing. And in the last 40 years, we've had 40 different schemes or bodies to boost local or regional growth. We had the Abercrombie Plan in London, the New Towns, the Economic Development Committees, the Urban Regeneration Corporations, the New Deal for Communities, the Regional Development Agencies, and yet none of these initiatives have been powerful enough to deal with the long-term secular trends of deindustrialization or the decline of coastal resorts. And that basic half-heartedness of governmental approach has been coupled with an unspoken assumption by policymakers that investment should always follow success. So that, to use a football metaphor, the approach has always been to hang around the goalmouth rather than being the playmaker. Sorry, I'm not a great expert on football, you get the general drift of what I'm trying to say. Or to borrow a Bible, borrow a biblical comparison. Governments have created a sort of Matthew effect. To him that hath shall be given. So you end up investing in areas where house prices are already high, where transport is already congested, and by turbocharging those areas, especially in London and the southeast, you drive prices even higher, and you force more and more people to move to the same expensive areas. 2/3 of graduates from our top 30 universities end up in London. And the result is that their commutes are longer, their trains are more crowded, and they have less time with their kids, and they worry at the same time that the younger generation won't be able to get a home, and that their leafy suburb or village will be engulfed in new housing development, but without the infrastructure to go with it. And so the process of levelling up is not just aimed at creating opportunity throughout the UK, it's about relieving the pressure in those parts that are currently overheating. And to those who seriously worry that levelling up could in some way be to the detriment of London and the South East, let me make some obvious points. And I speak as somebody who's spent more than a decade now campaigning to extend the lead of London as the greatest city on earth. Does anyone seriously believe it would be bad for London or has been bad for London to see the BBC growing and flourishing as it has in Manchester? Is it bad for London? You've got JP Morgan now having an enormous back office in Bournemouth, and the biggest employer in Dorset, one of the biggest private sector employers in Dorset. That's not bad for London. Of course it isn't. And it's obvious that greater regional prosperity means more customers and more business for our national metropolis that already leads the world in so many financial and business services and so many other sectors of the 21st century economy. So, levelling up is not a jam-spreading operation. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul, it's not zero-sum, it's win-win for the whole United Kingdom. And so this is the plan. And I will believe that we've made progress on levelling up when we've begun to raise living standards, spread opportunity, improve our public services, and restore people's sense of pride in their community across the whole of the UK. We've got to begin by getting the basics right, and we've got to begin by fighting crime, because we will never level up across our country. While some kids face the misery of dealing with the county lines drugs gangs, and some kids do not. And that's why we're putting rings of steel around towns that are plagued with these gangs and steadily driving them out. And so far we've squeezed more than 1,000 county lines drugs gangs out of business. And that's why we want tough sentences, we're imposing tough sentences, and we're recruiting 20,000 more police. We'll be ruthless in fighting crime, because it is the poorest and most vulnerable who suffer the most. And obviously to give kids alternatives to these gangs, we'll invest in all sorts of things, but particularly grassroots sports, and I can today announce another £50 million, for instance, for football pitches, so that we give new opportunities to the football stars of the future, and that ultimately you are never more than 15 minutes away from a high-quality football pitch. And we won't succeed in levelling up when so many people are off work because they're sick or stressed, or because they suffer from obesity or problems with their mental health. And that's why we are tackling those problems, tackling the problem of junk food. We're rewarding exercise, and we're investing colossally, more than ever before, in our National Health Service, building 40 new hospitals, recruiting 50,000 more nurses. We're going to deal with the backlog of those waiting for elective surgeries. And the single biggest thing we can do, of course, in addition to investing in public service, to change people's lives and to give them the confidence and the serotonin that everybody needs to deal with the day, is to give people the chance of a good job on decent pay. And that means the private sector has to invest to create those jobs, and we must create the conditions for business confidence. And when people look at the West Midlands, here where we are today, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, the place that changed the world, they remember, and you remember this, unbelievably, the number of private sector jobs actually fell 3% under the last Labour government in the West Midlands. And they know one of the reasons for that lack of productivity, one of the things that was holding the West Midlands back has been the lack of mass transit, the lack of public transport, the basic difficulty of getting from your home to your place of work. And that's why I support your vision, Andy, for putting in those new metro lines. And that's why today I'm fulfilling my promise to give 8 city regions, like the West Midlands, the funding to start making their bus and train networks as good as London by launching our City Region Sustainable Transport Fund. £4.2 billion that local leadership can spend on projects like contactless ticketing, new tram lines, bike lanes, and I speak as somebody who's putting more bike lanes than anybody else in this country. They're deeply resisted by some people, but overall they are massively popular, and I thoroughly recommend them. This is part of the biggest infrastructure investment in the history of our countries. £640 billion on roads, on rail, on housing, clean power, generation. We will use the findings of Sir Peter Hendy's Union Connectivity Review to see how we can strengthen the sinews of the whole United Kingdom, getting HS2 trains to stop, giving new impetus to projects that benefit the whole country, the A1, that links Scotland and England, the A75, that links Northern Ireland and Scotland and England, and the links into Wales along the M4 corridor, the A55. Dozens of other crucial projects, long overdue, like the A303 to the Greater Southwest. And we've made huge progress, by the way, in rolling out gigabit broadband throughout the UK. When I became Prime Minister almost exactly 2 years ago, 7% of the country, as I never tired of saying at the time, 7% of the country had gigabit connection. By the end of this year, we will be hitting 60%. And that has the potential to revolutionise our patterns of work and provide a tailwind for levelling up. And no matter how frustrating we may find life on Zoom, we can see how this technology and its successors will allow the places that have been left behind or felt left behind to become places that retain their talent. And professionals will be able to stay and bring up their families and enjoy a higher quality of life without the need to move to a supposedly fashionable conurbation. And we're also helping young people to fulfill their dream of owning the home in a place where they want to live, with our 95% mortgage guarantee, as well as reserving a portion of homes in some new developments for first-time buyers at a discount of at least 30%. And this government is backing the improvement of the lives of people growing up in these areas with the Levelling Up Fund, £4.8 billion to be spent across the whole of Britain, England, Scotland and Wales, and with town deals, with another 15 of them announced today, helping local people to renew the places they live, from the Civic Square in Tilbury to the Hippodrome Theatre in Todmorden, removing chewing gum, graffiti, breathing new life into town centres through our High Street strategy, which is also published today. And though the overall, each change may be individually small, the overall effect can be transformative in making that environment attractive as a place to live and to bring up a family and to invest. And of course, what is the key question that people ask themselves, young families ask themselves about a neighbourhood? It's not just whether it's safe and all has good transport, it's whether the schools are good. And we need to give all our children the guarantee of a great education with safe and well-disciplined classes, fantastic teachers. So we are literally levelling up funding for primary and secondary education with a higher level of funding per pupil, so that every teacher starts on a salary of £30,000. And we must face the reality that in loss of learning and loss of life chances, some children have been hit harder by this pandemic than others. And so we've put in place the biggest tutoring program anywhere in the world to help them catch up. A catch-up program, by the way, that is already worth £3 billion on top of the £14 billion that we invested as soon as this government came in. But it is in post-16 education, post-16, where the differences across our society are starkest. It cannot be right that Bath has 78% of its population with a level 3 or equivalent qualification. Bradford has only 42%. And that's why this government is so obsessed, the Chancellor, everybody, Rob Jenrick, we are all obsessed with skilling up our population. We love our universities. We believe they're one of the great glories of this country. But we need to escalate the value of practical and vocational education with its power to transform people's lives. And that's why we're rolling out T-levels and apprenticeships, because we know that higher level apprentices can earn more than the average graduate 5 years after graduation. That's why we're creating the lifetime skills guarantee so that adults can go on to get those level 3 qualifications. And so as we improve skills and cut crime and upgrade transport and ensure that gigabit broadband is extending its invisible electronic tendrils into every home in the country and opening up limitless vistas of information and opportunity. By that process, we want to make the whole country more attractive for investment. And as we turn this country into a science superpower, doubling public investment in R&D to 22 billion, we want to use that state lead to trigger private sector investment across the whole country. So we have hubs of research or innovation like the one we're in today, exactly like the one we're in, which is actually driving battery technology. This battery industrialization center is helping to drive battery technology. When we're going to need huge numbers of these batteries, and there's going to be at least 70,000 people we need skilled to be working just in making the batteries alone. This battery industrialization center is driving growth from Cornwall to Thurso, so that we can do that without in any way detracting from the golden triangle of Oxford, London, Cambridge, which is the greatest scientific constellation anywhere in this hemisphere, and drive high-tech, high-wage jobs across the whole of the UK. We'll use post-Brexit freedoms, such as free ports, to drive those investments across the UK, especially in green technology, from wind turbines to batteries such as the ones we see being developed here today, zero-emission planes, solar power, nuclear power, hydrogen, all of which, of course, is set out in the government's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. And our new Office for Investment will land investments and is continuing to land investments in all parts of the UK, like Nissan coming into Sunderland, as you saw the other day, the new gigafactory for batteries, Stellantis to Ellesmere Port, Fujifilm in Teesside, Chinna Glass in Ebbw Vale, all just in the last few weeks, and not forgetting the wise decision of Heinz tomato ketchup to relocate manufacture of that vital product from to Wigan from Holland, and about time too. And now is the time, I think, to scrutinise the incentives that we offer as a country as those against those offered by other countries. And yes, business overwhelmingly chooses Britain for all sorts of good reasons. And it was good to see the London stock market recover its edge over Amsterdam the other day. But now is the time to do even better. And there is one final ingredient. The most important factor in levelling up. The yeast that lifts the whole mattress of dough, the magic sauce, the ketchup of catch-up. And that is leadership. And that brings me to the crux of this argument. This country is not only one of the most imbalanced economies in our neighborhood and in the developed world. It is also one of the most centralized. And those two defects are obviously connected. We're making progress now. We've created metro mayors, I used to be one, and some of the best of them are relentless champions for their communities, like Andy. And Andy provides the answer to the Kissinger question, who are you going to call in the West Midlands if you want to set up an EV factory, if you want to find the person who can put together the transport, the skills, the utilities, who are you going to call to make things happen? And you know exactly who to ring. You ring Andy. And after 20 years of trial and error, we're starting to see the results of this devolution. It's not entirely a coincidence now that long-term secular trend I described is being reversed. And cities that had seemed to be in long-term decline are now seeing a resurgence in their population and a growth in productivity that actually outstrips the rest of the country. And we need this levelling up to go much further and faster, because the UK is outstandingly successful in spite of its handicap, in spite of only firing on one cylinder, if I can use that metaphor, in a battery factory and in a great battery industrialization center. If you understand what I mean, if you look at France and Germany, other European G7 economies, the levels of productivity across their great cities are much more directly comparable. It's much more even. Imagine if we could level up, not just lengthening London's lead around the world, but closing the gap between London and the rest of the UK's great cities. That would increase the productivity, the GDP of our country, the opportunities for millions of people in our country, and it would increase GDP by tens of billions, many tens of billions. And then, of course, we should go further, because the political geography of this country is as rich and as diverse and idiosyncratic as the landscape itself. The UK will never fit into some cookie-cutter division into regions named after points of the compass. But where there are obvious communities of identity and affinity and real economic geographies, there is the chance, I know you're all listening, to encourage local leadership. And I want to return to that point. It's not just this country is the most economically imbalanced, it's the most centralised. And that's because for many decades, central government in London relentlessly crushed local leadership. And we must be honest about why that was necessary. It was because we were then in the grip of a real ideological conflict in which municipal socialist governments were irresponsibly bankrupting cities and were genuinely hostile to business in such a way that government was actually forced to intervene. Now, with some notable exceptions, some parts of opposing parties, that argument is over. And most of the big metro mayors know that private sector investment is crucial. They know that one of their jobs, which they will, of course, be attacked in their local media, is to get on a plane and go to the big trade and property fairs and hustle for their hometown. And today, we want to go a step further. Because if the big cities are beginning to catch up, it is the rest of the country, those historic, famous towns, or our shires, where local leaders now need to be given the tools to make things happen for their communities. And to do that, we must take a more flexible approach to devolution in England. We need to rewrite the rule book with new deals for the counties, and there's no reason why our great counties cannot benefit from the same powers we've devolved to city leaders, so that they can take charge of levelling up local infrastructure, like the bypass they desperately want to end congestion and pollution, to unlock new jobs or new bus routes plied by clean green buses made with batteries pioneered in this place, because they then get the chance to control the bus routes. Or they can level up the skills of the people in their area because they know what local business wants and needs because they're working with them every day. And of course, you can see the risk and the catch in all of this. And we have to learn the lessons of the last 50 years. We must get the right local leadership. And I have to say, Ken Livingstone of the 2000s was a very different creature from Ken Livingstone of the 1980s. You see what I mean? But the loony left remains pretty loony, my friends. And we need accountability. And as I say, we will not be proceeding with a one-size-fits-all template. One possibility is a directly elected mayor for individual counties, and if you can think of a better title than mayor for somebody who represents a county, then please send me an email. But there are other possibilities. We could devolve power for a specific local purpose, like a county or a city coming together to improve local services like buses. So my offer to you, that's to say all the would-be local leaders who are tuning into this conversation about levelling up, my offer to you is all of you who see a role for yourselves in local leadership, come to us in government. Come to Neil O'Brien or to me or to Rob with your vision for how you will level up, how you will back business, attract more good jobs and improve your services. And come to us with your plan for strong, accountable leadership. And we will give you the tools to change your area for the better. And it can be done, because there's no intrinsic reason why one part of this country should be fated to decline, or indeed fated to succeed. The towns and cities that people say have been left behind have not lacked for human ingenuity. They've not been short of people with courage or intelligence or imagination. And there's no place in this country that does not have something special about it. Something about their scenery or culture or history or tradition, some selling point, unlike anything else or anywhere else in the world. And they don't think that they're left behind, and they're right. They think that they're the future, or they could be the future, and they're right about that too. And all they need is the right people to believe in them, to lead them, and to invest in them, and for government to get behind them. And that is what we're going to do. Thank you all very much for listening. Right. Thank you very much for listening to that extensive speech about levelling up. And I'm now going to go to our friends from, well, actually, I'm going to go to Tony Danker of the CBI and then Professor Pam Thomas from the Faraday Institution, I think, before we come to, and then we're going to go to Beth.
Prime Minister, thank you for that speech.
Tony.
Businesses up and down the country, I think, are very highly motivated by the levelling up agenda and keen to work with you to turn it from ambition into action. One of the most exciting developments, I think, in recent years is the emergence of local economic clusters across every part of the UK, and everything from renewable energy to advanced manufacturing to digital services. I'm wondering how you think we can turn those local success stories into national and ultimately global success stories, and how can business and government work together to achieve that?
Thank you very much, Tony. I think that the answer, you're so right. And what is happening across the country is that you are seeing this story of local success, the dispersal of high-tech jobs, of innovation arriving in all parts of the country. And what it needs is business and local leadership to work together to hold up a mirror to that part of the country, that city, that town, that region, and say, this is the narrative about us. This is what is happening. This is the story of our success. This is what we have to offer. And if you come and invest here, this is how we'll help you. And that's why I put this emphasis on leadership. You need the local champion. You need to bring together, whether it's the LEP, whatever the means is, whether it's through the mayoralty, you need to bring people together and then project the story to the world. That is absolutely vital. And I've no doubt at all that it can be done. But I'm glad that the basic agenda has the support of the CBI. And it's great, by the way, Tony, can I just say, after a long period, to find the government and the CBI in lockstep, at least on this. So thank you very much for coming. Pam of the Faraday Institute.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I was very encouraged to hear you speak about Britain as a science superpower. So I was really wondering what your vision of levelling up across the country, together with the ambition to be a scientific superpower, means for the involvement of world-class research institutions such as the Faraday Institution.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Pam. The Faraday Institution is a quite incredible body. It's based in Harwell in Oxford, but actually it links together all the universities that are conducting research into batteries, amongst other things. And we need these batteries. There's absolutely no question. We're going to, at the moment, it was great that Envision brought the Gigafactory to Sunderland. We have high hopes of the British Volt plant in Blythe, but even those two added together will only supply a fraction of the demand that the UK's own domestic vehicle market will have. And we're going to need, I think, 70,000 people, skilled people, just to make batteries across this country. So the answer to your question, Pam, is that we want to work with you, with the Faraday Institute, with this body here, with the UK BIC, to make sure that we produce those gigafactories across the whole of the UK. There's obviously a case for having a gigafactory here in the West Midlands. You're going to want one next to a centre of automotive manufacturing, but even that won't be enough to satisfy the demands just of the UK domestic market. So we want to do that, and what we also need to do is to make sure that the value in those batteries comes from the UK as well, because everybody knows that the raw materials that go into batteries are often sourced from around the world. We can do much more to source those chemicals, those metals from the UK, and to make sure that this country retains its lead in devising ever cleaner, ever greener, and more beautiful technology. Where was the lithium-ion battery invented? Oxford, I think I'm right to say. And yet it's other countries that have taken that, as so often, taken that British invention, gone away and become pioneers themselves. We now need to recapture our leading role, and I've absolutely no doubt that we can do it. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Thank you. Prime Minister, you talked in your speech about a moral duty to unite and level up our country, but over the past month, you and your ministers have stoked division over footballers taking the knee, saying it was gesture politics, saying it was fans' choice to boo the team. And going back, there is further evidence of this divisive politics and language from you, be it describing Muslim women as in veils as letterboxes or bank robbers, or indeed African people as pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. For many people, your own record personally undermines your image as a unifying Prime Minister. What are you going to do to change that?
Well, thanks, Beth. Obviously, I reject that, or disagree with it, I should say. And I think that racism has absolutely no place in our society. And I think that the England team represented the very best of us and our country. And I think that the overwhelming support, the outpouring of love for the England team after the match on Sunday showed this country at its best and at its most united. And I think what we all want to do is take practical steps to prevent racism in all its forms. And I think the football banning order regime, the changes to that that we've announced will be valuable. You can't go to the match if you're guilty of promoting hate and racism online, but we've got to go further, and we're going to use the online harms bill to ensure that the big internet companies, the social media platforms that allow race hate to be peddled on their platforms can face fines amounting to 10% of their global revenues. And as I said to them the other day, when I got them all in, Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram and I can't remember the other ones, those are the main ones. I said we will not hesitate to go further because they do have the technology to sort this out. They can adjust their algorithms, and we will use legislation if we have to, just as we use the threat of legislation, for instance, to stop the European Super League. Thanks very much, Beth. Can we go to Alex Forsyth of the BBC?
You said you rejected what I said, but it is true that your ministers did not from the start condemn the booing of the players. Do you think that was a mistake? And as PM, do you personally now regret not being strong enough about this right from the start?
I always said that it was wrong to boo the England players, Beth, and that is my firm belief. And I think that as a society, what we need to do is understand that we've made progress in tackling racism, I would say, in my lifetime. A lot of progress. But I think we have to recognize that there's still a long way to go. And we've got, as a government, to lead and to use the tools we have at our disposal, the ones that I've just mentioned, to show that we are firm and that there are things we simply won't tolerate, and to take the argument and the fight to those who control these very powerful media platforms, social media platforms, with their immense ability to wound and to undermine. They can stop it, and we're going to make sure that they do. Thanks very much, Beth. Let's go to Alex Forsyth of the BBC.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You've painted a pretty clear picture today about the impact of an unbalanced economy, but you haven't given us a lot of new detail about how you deal with it. You're almost 2 years into the job now. Where is the clear strategy beyond investment in high streets and infrastructure as to how to tackle what is often entrenched inequalities around health, education, aspiration, and of course how you measure and define success? And if I may, Prime Minister, Henry Dimbleby has released his national food strategy today. Are you minded to accept the recommendations, including those around taxes?
Well, Alex, thank you very much. I'm respectfully going to urge you just to go back over some of what I said, because I do think that, in all fairness, there was at least the skeleton of what to do. And you're right to focus on education and aspiration. But the point I wanted, and all the investments that we're making in public services, in fighting crime, all these are vital for levelling up. But perhaps the most important thing you've got to achieve is you've got to restore a local sense of pride and ambition and self-expectation amongst the local leadership. And that can be done. That can be done. And we in this government are absolutely determined to do everything in our power to achieve it. And what I would say to people thinking about this is just imagine the potential of this country, or what this country could be like, if all its areas were as productive as the most productive parts, or even half as productive as the most productive parts. We have a real, or half as productive again, I should say, as the most productive parts. We have a real opportunity to change people's lives and change the way this country is going, and this government is going to continue to drive it with all our might. On your point about Henry Dimbleby and obesity, obviously I will study the report. I think it's an independent report. I know that I think there are doubtless some good ideas in it. As I said earlier on, we believe in tackling obesity, trying to help people to lose weight with promoting exercise and tackling junk food advertising and so on. I'm not, I must say, attracted to the idea of extra taxes on hardworking people. Let me just signal that. But I will study his report with interest. Robert Peston from ITV.
Morning, Prime Minister. You pointed out that levelling up will not succeed if businesses lack confidence. About 12 days ago, you said that next Monday there would be no obligation to wear masks. You abolished the legal requirement to wear masks, and now you're saying you want all of us to wear masks. Businesses are confused. On this, you have shown the lack of an important quality you just cited, leadership. And second, something remarkable has just happened. The manager of an England football team seems to have united Great Britain in a way that you are struggling to do. What can you learn from Gareth Southgate?
Right. Well, thank you very much, Robert. I would just say that on the message to business, I think that business is perfectly capable, despite any confusion that you may attempt to sow in people's minds. Robert, business is perfectly capable of understanding what we are doing. We're moving away from legal compulsion, but we're saying that, of course, the pandemic is not over, and sadly people have to remain cautious. And what we're saying is that in crowded places where you're meeting people that you don't normally come across, then you should continue to wear a face covering. So that's in the guidance. It's very clear, and I think everybody understands that. And it's perfectly clear from our guidance for public transport as well. The situation we hope will eventually change, but that's where we are at present. It doesn't mean there's a legal compulsion. It's guidance. I think most people can understand the difference. And on your point about the England football team, well, I repeat what I've said before. I'm lost in admiration for Gareth Southgate and the England team. They did an absolutely wonderful job, and they achieved something that we haven't seen many of us in our lifetimes. They got England, I should say, into the final of a huge knockout championship, and they so very nearly succeeded. And in the end, I think the fact that they didn't quite succeed didn't really detract from that achievement. It remains a stunning, stunning thing. And I think the way the players have behaved on and off the pitch has been an absolute credit to Gareth and the whole squad. Thank you. I salute the Gareth and the England team, and I sit at their feet. How about that, Rob? Will that do? Thank you, Jason Groves, Daily Mail.
Thanks, Prime Minister. I wanted to ask you about your opening remarks. Should we see Monday as Freedom Day? And if not, when might it be? Are we realistically waiting till next year before we can throw away our face masks? And separately, next week, I think, is the anniversary, the second anniversary of you telling us you had a plan for social care. What's happened to that plan? And how is it going to square with this levelling up agenda you've been talking about? You've said you want to cap care costs so that people don't have to sell their own homes. Won't that inevitably give more benefit to people who live in areas where house prices are higher?
Thanks, Jason. On your first point, we're in a far, far better position than we've been in at any previous point in this pandemic. By Monday, we will have offered a vaccination to everybody in this country over 18. It's a quite amazing thing to have achieved. We vaccinated a higher proportion of our population than I think any other European country, with the possible exception of Malta. Alas, the pandemic is still with us, but we are able to go ahead in the cautious way that I have described. So we're able to, as I was saying to Robert, we're able to get rid of the legal restrictions, but the guidance has to remain in place, at least for the time being. And I think people can understand the progress that we have made, but they can also see the remaining risks. The risks are diminishing the whole time, but they of course remain. And on your point about social care, we're going to be in no doubt or anxiety about that. We're going to be publishing our plan for social care before too long. Let's go to Andy Woodcock of The Independent.
Andy Woodcock from The Independent. Prime Minister, in your speech just now, you said that when devolving power to local regions, you don't want to do it in a one-size-fits-all region way because the loony left remains loony. Don't you think that will sound a lot to some people like doctoring the democratic process in order to ensure that power is devolved only to people who agree with you? And also, if I may go back to the football and racism issue, you've waxed very indignant over the last few days about racist remarks against the England team on the internet. But in the House of Commons yesterday, you were asked to disown, to apologise for, to say you regretted your previous remarks about piccaninnies and about Muslim women looking like letterboxes. You said you dealt with it in the past, but in the past all you've said is that you were sorry if people were offended, which is a very different thing, as you'll agree. Do you not feel that your refusal to offer a full apology and to disown those remarks gives a green light to people now who want to make racist remarks on the internet?
Thanks very much. Well, first of all, on your point, Andy, about whether we're only going to, we'll deal with anybody. Of course we will, and quite rightly, we want local leaders to come forward. But obviously, with what I'm saying is that with these powers must come responsibility and accountability, and that's what we want. What we want to see, and people taking charge of their local area, leading it, and not maybe just seeking opportunities to point up differences between themselves and central government or whatever, but actually taking a responsibility for the problems that they find, solving them with our help, obviously. But that's what we want to see. And on your second point, I think that the best thing I can say about that is I've obviously apologised in the past for things that I've said that have caused offence. I continue to apologise for them, and I think what people really want to see from government are practical steps to stamp out racism and make sure that we live in a happy, tolerant, generous and loving society. And that's what I want to see. Jess Elgott of The Guardian.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said, as Mayor of London, that you boasted, in fact, that a pound spent in Croydon was worth far more to the country than one spent in Strathclyde. Is it your aim as Prime Minister now to make sure it's the opposite, or that changes? And a second, if I may, one word that felt like it was missing from your speech is austerity, and the effect that has had on inequality and widening the gaps between different regions. And do you think your predecessors shoulder some of the blame for those inequalities that you described in your speech because of the huge cuts that local councils have had to enforce?
Yeah, Jess, look, you're making an incredibly important point, and I want people to understand that this objective, this levelling up project, is not about trying to stop the progress and development of the greatest city on earth. And indeed, I think that it would be a fine thing if the present mayor got on with some more of the infrastructure, the home building projects that he needs to do. What I'm saying is that it's a total mistake to think that you can just get on with a lopsided approach to the UK economy. And we need to recognise that the growth of the future, the opportunity of the future, is going to come from levelling up across the whole of the UK. And I think that will not only be socially, morally the right thing to do, I also think it will pay off massively for the UK economy. And you had a second question.
Austerity, how much does that bear the blame to?
Look, I mean, I don't think you'll find that I was ever one of those politicians who banged on much about austerity, and I never thought it was a particularly helpful choice of word. John Walker of the Coventry Telegraph.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. You began by talking about the COVID situation, and I think we know, even though you're urging people to be careful, that the infection rate is going to increase significantly after the fourth stage of ending the lockdown on July 19th. And you've said that we can do that because vaccinations have broken a link between infection and hospitalisation and death. But what does this mean for those areas where the vaccination rate is still extremely low? In parts of Birmingham, for example, 6 out of 10 people have still not had even a first vaccination. For example, in Nechells, Alum Rock, Newtown, 6 out of 10 adults have not had a first vaccination. What do you expect to happen in those areas when the infection rate increases? And are they going to pay quite a heavy price for ending lockdown? Very briefly, a second question, if I may. You talked about the West Midlands being a fantastic site for a gigafactory. I know Andy Street is either asking you or is about to ask you pretty soon for a large sum of money to help make that happen. Are you going to provide the cash?
Yeah, okay. John, on your very good point about vaccination rates, actually the Midlands has got, West Midlands in particular, has got a very, very high rate of vaccination overall. You're right about particular pockets, areas where there is low take-up. What we've got to do is to encourage people to come forward as enthusiastically as we can. And if I can just suggest, I think the way to do that is by engaging with local leaders in local communities, not in any way trying to blame or to stigmatise those who are not getting vaccinated at the rate that they should. I don't think that's the right way to do it. It's simply a question of encouraging people to take it up. It is the right thing. It's by far the best thing for you and your family. When you get your offer of a jab or a second jab, please take it up. And I know that Andy has been helping to lead that campaign as well in this area. On your point about the gigafactory, well, look, I can't think of it. There are very few people in this country who've been more successful in extorting massive checks from the Treasury than Andy Street. But I'm HS2, all sorts of things. I'm not certain that you've yet been to me with the request for the gigafactory. You're now taking off his mask. Very, very, very worrying development here. I thought I'd got through this, but Andy, go on. Well, Andy, I congratulate you. Such is your influence, you managed to persuade the Coventry Telegraph to put the question for you, and I look forward to receiving the request. But obviously, the government is there to support and to give the strategic direction. But I hope it's been clear from everything I've said that levelling up only works when the private sector comes in as well, and that's what we want to achieve. Anyway, thank you all very much for having me along this morning. Thank you all.